Hey guys, Sam here at NA Studios. Today I want to take a look at the 5 plugins that you need in your home studio in 2022 to take your music to the next level. Now these 5 plugins, some of them are going to be paid, but I'm going to give you some free alternatives where possible so that everyone can get these. These are going to be accessible to anybody, and they're going to make it so your music is prepared and ready to take to that next stage. And this video is sponsored by DistroKid, who in my opinion are the best portal to getting your music out there. Let's check it out. Now the first plugin I want to take a look at is Magic AB, and this is from Sample Magic. I've been using this plugin for years now and I absolutely love it. It's been discontinued unfortunately, but it's been replaced with Metric AB. Now normally it frustrates me when a plugin I purchase stops being supported, but the new one is so much better and I was happy to pay the entrance fee. You've got so many more features than you used to have, with displays for frequency response, peak data, band solo functions and loads more. So why do you need this kind of plugin in your life? Well, the beauty of reference plugins is that you can compare your mix to any mix you load into the plugin at the click of a button. This is so useful when you're trying to get the overall tonality of your track to match something that you aspire it to sound like. With many of these plugins you can load in multiple reference tracks for comparison. It's kind of frustrating to have to solo and mute multiple channels when trying to compare your track to another in your DAW, so this kind of plugin really simplifies the process. As is often the case, this kind of plugin costs money. There are a number that cost less than Metric AB, albeit with fewer features, but depending on your DAW, you can often make a reference channel by yourself by just doing things in a specific way. In Logic, for example, have your reference track on its own channel and keep it muted. Then when you press solo, it will override the mute and you'll just hear the reference track. To switch back, just take solo off and it will go back to its original muted state. Number 2 is Sonarworks. Now I love Sonarworks. In a room like I'm in now, in a home studio, it enables you to get a sound that you're not going to be fighting against the acoustics of your room. Unless you've got a studio that's built hundreds, thousands of pounds, £1 million sometimes, you're not going to get that acoustically perfect space. And Sonarworks can really help in this area. Now room correction software in plugin form is relatively new on the scene, with Sonarworks being founded in 2012. The idea of effectively EQing the sound coming out of the speakers is something that's been done in live sound for a long time, but plugins like Sonarworks have made this easier for home studios in recent years. The idea being you get a flat response omnidirectional microphone and measure the frequency response of your room using test signals that Sonarworks outputs. Now these normally sound like an alien spacecraft taking off, but in my experience do a very good job of flattening the sound of the room. Here you can see that my room has a pretty phenomenal peak at around 148 Hz. This is due to the room dimensions essentially amplifying certain frequencies as the sound waves reinforce and multiply. As you measure, Sonarworks will respond to these peaks as well as any troughs and correct them through some pretty extensive EQ moves. There are several competitors to Sonarworks, some of which come with monitor speakers when you buy them, like Genelic's offering, but some like IK Multimedia ARC or ARC come in a similar format to Sonarworks, but none of them are free, so I suggest that you check out Room EQ Wizard. This is a really in-depth application that allows you to measure your room in a similar way to those paid alternatives, but will display the data in far more ways, some of which can be more useful and some of which can be a bit confusing for the amateur room measurer. Although it doesn't come with a plugin that will compensate for the frequency imbalance in your room, it gives you everything you need to know about where the imbalances lie, and from there you can make more informed decisions about your mix and any potential acoustic treatment. If Room EQ Wizard tells you you've got a pretty aggressive peak forming around 150 Hz, as I have, then you know that any tracks that sound like they have a build up in that area are perhaps more likely to just be exciting the room more, as opposed to having a real issue in the balance. It's well worth checking out and can be an invaluable tool when you're considering how your home studio is reacting to the audio you're playing in it. You can be sure that when you distribute your music, your listeners are hearing the tracks exactly the way they should sound, and not any corrections that you've had to make to get it to sound good in your room. Now, if distributing your music is something that you're going to be doing, I would strongly advise you take a look at DistroKid. DistroKid is a great way of getting your music out to all the online platforms. You can go to Spotify, Apple Music, TikTok, Deezer, any streaming platform you want, you can get to through DistroKid. There's just a yearly fee and everything is taken care of. Check the link out in the description below and you can get 7% off your first yearly subscription. Number 3 is a dynamic EQ. Now, I like to use a dynamic EQ for several reasons across a mix. The first one though is for ducking certain groups of instruments when other instruments are in the mix. Think about a case where vocals are coming in and you can't quite hear them over the top of guitars. That's a really handy one for me. But it's also a problem solver. In a home studio, you're, as we said, going to be possibly a less than ideal acoustic environment. You might get resonances, you might get rings, you might get sounds that you don't particularly want. And for that reason, it's very important to have something where you can suppress those frequencies, but only when they become an issue. TDR Nova from Tokyo Dawns Labs is my personal favourite dynamic EQ, and is a plugin that I would urge every home studio owner to download. If you're feeling flush, you can support them by paying for the Gentleman's Edition, which adds features that make this plugin exponentially more powerful. Now in this instance, I've got TDR Nova on my guitar bus with the sidechain input set to be the lead vocal. Take a listen to how much better we can hear the vocal once we tell the dynamic EQ to suppress the mid-range when the vocal is present. Dynamic EQs can solve a myriad of issues and are the number one tool I use every day to stop frequency masking and allow each instrument to be heard when it needs to be. Number 4 is iZotope RX. Now iZotope RX is a famous plugin suite where you can get rid of so many issues that you might have in your audio. You can be creative in there, you can be surgical in there, and it's a one-stop shop for you being able to get rid of any problems that might have arisen at the tracking stage for your music. And it's perfect in a home studio where you might be recording in a space where you have aeroplanes flying over, you might have a dog barking, you might have some sort of issues that you need resolving, and you can get rid of them completely using iZotope RX. iZotope RX is an application that needs no introduction. You can remove any intrusive noises in your recordings that may have come from noises outside your studio, or perhaps when recording in a less than ideal acoustic environment. And amazingly, you can also save a take that has been clipped and bring an unusable recording back to life. You can also use Music Rebalance, which is an amazing tool designed specifically to allow you to isolate different areas of a mix. If you want to create a version of a track without vocals, you can easily achieve that. Or perhaps you just want the vocals for a remix, you can do that too. If you're recording vocals, there are a load of great modules in there which will remove mouth clicks, plosives, rustling, and basically any issues that can arise in a home studio recorded vocal. Although the price of admission for the advanced version is pretty high, you'll likely get a lot of use out of the Elements version, which is often on sale and can be picked up for a very reasonable price. It's a lifesaver when you have issues with your recordings but don't have the option to re-record. I don't know of any free alternatives that do quite as much as RX does in one package, although there are a few worthy mentions. If you're a Cubase user, Spectral Layers is well worth a look and can achieve some of the same tasks as RX, albeit with an interface that initially confused me. Adobe Audition also has a spectral editor that is helpful for getting rid of problematic clicks and pops in your audio, although nothing that really comes close to the extensive selection of tools in RX. Although, if you're looking at using the Music Rebalance tools in RX to create acapellas or instrumental versions of tracks, there are a number of free online tools that will do the job. Check out vocalzap.com or vocalremover.org to get started. Number 5 is a plugin for getting you to the next stage in a mastering sense. Now, I'm not saying that you're necessarily going to be mastering your own music. That's a completely different conversation should you mix and master your own music. But something to be able to get you to the state where you're sort of 50% of the way there, so you know what it might sound like in a mastering context, is going to be super important. And there are a myriad of different plugins that can get you there. Mastering is one of those things that is often best left to the professionals. But just because you're in a home studio, why shouldn't you learn about the process for yourself and at least have a good idea of how your track is going to sound once it has had mastering dynamics processing applied? The two famous all-in-one mastering processors that we see time and time again are Ozone from iZotope and FGX from Slate Digital. Both are fantastic applications and worth checking out. Both iZotope and Slate Digital offer subscription plans where you can get their whole plugin suite for a low monthly payment, and iZotope regularly has offers on for their plugins. In FGX, I love the extra dynamics processing you have available, with the transient and dynamic perception processing, along with the excellent sounding mastering compressor. Ozone has a whole host of features, far too varied and complete to go into right now. Suffice to say that if you're mastering and have a sound that you're looking for, it's likely that Ozone can provide. Multiband compressors, maximizers, EQ that you can split into mid-side mode, stereo imagers, and everything else you can possibly imagine. A free alternative that I use daily is limiter number 6 from Vladislav Gonkarov. Apologies if I've pronounced that wrong, and I'm pretty certain I have. This plugin gives you several different dynamics processors aimed at giving you a decent output level and controlling the overall sound of your audio. You've got a compressor, limiter, high frequency limiter, mid-side mode, everything you need to control the dynamics in your master, and if nothing else, give you a better idea of how it may sound when it has been mastered. Thanks so much for checking it out. These are my 5 that I think are so important in 2022. When we're looking at streaming, when we're looking at different ways of distributing our music, these 5 plugins are going to be the ones that will get you there and be able to get you closest to the sound that's in your head from a home studio environment. You might not have the money to shell out on really expensive plugins, which is why I've included the free versions where I can. And in my experience, the free versions are going to get you 80–90% of the way there, and you're going to be really satisfied with what you've got. And if you think it may be the case that spending that extra bit of money and getting those plugins for your home studio to take your music to the next level is going to be something worth investing in, then I would definitely take a look at some of the plugins that I've shown you here today. I'll catch you again soon. Take care.